My fiance planned to betray me and was unfaithful during summer. After we broke up, we both moved on separately. Nathan sat, his heart sinking with each word Leah uttered. The frustration and anger he felt were palpable, intensifying with every sentence she spoke. Their day had begun as a typical Saturday drive, one of their usual weekend excursions. However, as they headed to a long-awaited concert, the conversation took an unexpected turn. Nathan had casually mentioned a post-graduation getaway, a serene retreat to the mountains, envisioned as a perfect escape just for the two of them, away from the chaos of daily life. He had pondered this idea for some time, imagining the tranquil setting and the precious moments they could share. Yet Leah's response was far from what he anticipated. Her voice was gentle yet assertive as she corrected him. "Nathan, I've already made plans to leave with Sarah and Emma right after I graduate. We've been planning this cross-country trip for years." The reality of her words hit Nathan hard as he gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles whitening. "You can't be serious," he protested, disbelief lacing his tone. "We discussed focusing on us after your graduation, not you embarking on some elaborate road trip with your friends." Leah looked at him, her expression a mix of calm and determination, seemingly prepared for his reaction. "Nathan, I never promised to cancel the trip. This has been in the works since our freshman year. We've scrimped and saved, worked overtime, and made countless sacrifices to make it possible. You've known about this plan all along. I thought we were past this." The air thickened with tension as Nathan's frustration boiled over. "But we're engaged, Leah. We should be concentrating on our future together. How can you justify leaving for the entire summer with them? What about our plan?" Leah's eyes narrowed, her patience wearing thin. Her next words were measured, yet they cut deep, underscoring the rift that was forming between their expectations and reality. "Nathan, this isn't about choosing sides," Leah reasoned, her voice steady despite the growing tension. "This trip is something I've been dreaming about for years. You supported your own adventures, your work retreats and weekends away with your college friends. I never questioned those because I understood they mattered to you. This journey means just as much to me." Nathan shook his head, his frustration evident. "But there's a difference, Leah. My trips were for work, not extended holidays with friends. And let's be honest about Sarah and Emma. They have a reputation for going overboard. How am I supposed to stay calm, knowing you'll be with them all summer amidst all the partying?" Leah crossed her arms, her stance firm. "Sarah and Emma are my closest friends. I won't stand for you disparaging them. You're exaggerating what this trip will be. It's about exploring, having fun, and yes, I'll be back. Doesn't change any." Nathan clenched his jaw, his voice a low growl as he battled his right. "If you take this trip, it changes everything. You may not see it now, but I do. How can things possibly remain the same after you've spent months with them? Can you honestly tell me we'll just resume where we left off? Do you even grasp what this means for us?" Leah exhaled sharply, a mix of frustration and weariness clouding. "Nathan, I love you. This isn't about ending things between us, but this trip is a part of who I am. I can't simply cancel it over your sudden fears." As Nathan drove, his gaze fixed forward, but his thoughts swirling, it felt as though the foundation of their relationship was slipping away. "Listen," he said, his tone. "If you go, don't expect everything to be the same when you return. Choosing this trip feels like you're choosing them over what we have." Leah's face softened, but her resolve remained. "It's not fair. I'm not choosing about you or them. It's about me needing to do. It's just a trip, Nathan. I'll be back and we can keep building our future just like we planned." Leah's words were meant to reassure, but as Nathan pulled into the concert venue's parking lot, the air between them felt charged with unresolved tension. The evening stretched out ahead, the excitement of the concert now overshadowed by the turmoil inside him. A knot tightened in Nathan's stomach, the gravity of their conversation weighing heavily on him. They parked and entered the concert hall, but Nathan's anticipation had evaporated. The melodies he had eagerly awaited all week receded into a distant murmur, his mind replaying their exchange, fixated on Leah's decision to proceed with the trip despite their shared dreams for the future. Post-concert, as they walked to the car, Leah reached out, intertwining her fingers with his. Normally, this gesture brought him comfort, but tonight it felt hollow, as if a subtle divide had formed between them. "You're really set on this, aren't you?" Nathan murmured as they reached the car. Leah withdrew her hand with a sigh. "Nathan, I've made up my mind. This is important to me. It doesn't mean I love you any less." She looked at him, her eyes searching for some sign of understanding. Nathan unlocked the car and slid into the driver's seat, the silence enveloping them more oppressive than the concert's loudest chords. He started the engine but paused, his thoughts a whirlwind of emotion. "Let's just head home," Leah whispered, breaking the heavy silence. He responded with silence, putting the car in gear and driving off, too entangled in his thoughts to speak. The familiar route to her apartment did nothing to ease the tightening knot in his stomach. Arriving at her building, he stopped the car but made no move to turn off the engine or escort her to the door as was their custom. Leah unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to him, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "Aren't you coming up?" Nathan shook his head, his voice steady but cold. "No, Leah, not tonight." Her expression flickered with surprise and hurt, marking a moment of painful clarity between them. "Why not? What's happening, Nathan?" "We always spend the night together after concert." Leah's voice was tinged with concern as she watched Nathan's expression harden. "I don't know, Leah. Maybe I just need some time to think," Nathan replied, his voice steady but filled with a turmoil that belied his calm demeanor. "You've made your plans clear, and I need to figure out where that leaves us." Leah's forehead creased with worry. "Nathan, don't do this. It's just a trip." "I assured you nothing will change between us." "That's where you're wrong, Leah," Nathan countered, his voice low and firm. "Everything has already changed." Leah opened her mouth to speak but found herself at a loss for words. Instead, she reached for the door handle, pausing to look back at Nathan with a mix of sadness and resolve. "Good night, Nathan," she murmured before stepping out and closing the car door behind her. Nathan watched her ascend the steps to her apartment, his heart sinking with each step she took. He remained parked outside, lost in thought, long after she had disappeared inside. The dashboard's dim light illuminated his troubled expression as he grappled with their uncertain future. Eventually, he drove away, the car's quiet hum echoing the silence and amplifying the sense of solitude that surrounded him. Despite Leah's assurances, Nathan felt a profound sense of foreboding, as if the very foundation of their relationship was beginning to crack. Back in her apartment, Leah leaned against the door the moment it clicked shut, her heart racing. The remnants of their conversation hung heavily around her like a dense fog. She knew Nathan was deeply hurt, but the magnitude of his reaction baffled her. Taking a deep breath, she walked into the living room to find Sarah and Emma lounging on the couch, wine glasses in hand. Sarah looked up, one eyebrow arched inquisitively. "Well, how did he take it?" Leah exhaled a heavy sigh, the frustration evident in her voice. "Not well. He's really upset. It's like he thinks I'm abandoning him." Emma chuckled softly, swirling her wine. "He'll get over it. He's just scared of being left out, that's all." Her casual dismissal of Nathan's feelings underscored the gap between Leah's world with her friends and the life she envisioned with Nathan. Men always act like that when they're not the center of attention. "He'll get over it. They always do," Emma said, her voice casual as Leah slumped onto the couch beside her, visibly distressed. Leah ran her hands through her hair in frustration. "I just don't understand why he's taking it so hard. It's not like I'm breaking up with him. It's just a trip," she murmured, her confusion palpable. Sarah chuckled lightly, topping off her glass with more wine. "Nathan has always been a bit possessive, Leah. Maybe he's just worried you'll have too much fun without him around," she suggested, trying to lighten the mood. Leah frowned, her arms crossing defensively. "It's more than that, though. He said things wouldn't be the same when I get back. I never expected him to take it this seriously." Her voice trailed off, a mix of worry and irritation lingering in her tone. Emma set her glass down, leaning in with a more serious demeanor. "Leah, we've been planning this trip since our freshman year. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You can't just drop everything because Nathan's upset. He'll have to come to terms with it. He loves you too much not to," she reassured, her confidence unwavering. Leah gazed upward, the textured ceiling seeming to blur as she pondered their long-held plans versus Nathan's reaction. The conflict twisted inside her, a gnawing uncertainty about the impact of her decision. "Do you think I'm being selfish?" she asked quietly, her question hanging in the air, directed more at herself than at her friends. Sarah and Emma exchanged a knowing look before Sarah responded, "Leah, you have to live your life for yourself. If Nathan truly loves you, he'll support your dreams. And if he can't handle a few months apart, maybe he's not the right one for you." Leah bit her lip, weighing her friend's advice. Her love for Nathan was deep, and the thought of losing him was painful. Yet she was equally unwilling to forsake her own dreams. "I just hope he can understand," she whispered, a sense of resolve mingling with her apprehension. Meanwhile, Nathan's days became a monotonous cycle of work, gym, and home, each moment tainted with thoughts of Leah and her decision. The conversation from that night echoed relentlessly in his mind. He hadn't reached out to her since, torn between hurt and the hope that maybe, just maybe, she might reconsider. His heart felt heavy with a mixture of longing and dread, unsure when or how to bridge the growing gap between them. Nathan was acutely aware of Leah's impending departure, Each time he thought about it, a knot of frustration and uncertainty tightened in his chest. Part of him, a part that grew more insistent day by day, wanted to confront her, to plead with her to reconsider. Yet, another voice inside him whispered painfully that if she could leave so readily, perhaps their paths were meant to diverge. On the morning Leah was set to leave, Nathan found himself instinctively driving to her apartment. It was as if his car knew the way, each turn bringing him closer to a final resolution or a necessary farewell. He needed to see her, to speak with her one last time, hoping they might find a way to mend things or at least part with some understanding. Pulling into the nearly empty parking lot, he spotted Leah's car in its familiar spot. He parked nearby and sat for a moment, staring at the building, gathering his thoughts and steeling himself for the conversation ahead. With a deep breath, he stepped out of his truck and approached her door, his heart racing with a mix of dread and desperation. He knocked. After a tense few moments, the door swung open and Leah stood there, her expression one of surprise and subdued concern. "Nathan?" she uttered softly, stepping back to let him in. Nathan entered, his gaze quickly taking in the sight of the packed apartment, boxes stacked methodically by the door, suitcases lined up beside the couch. The tangible signs of her departure hit him hard. She was really I needed to see you before you went," he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. Leah nodded, her face mirroring his sadness. "I'm glad you came. I wanted to talk to you too." He looked at her, his voice barely a whisper. "Are you really going through with this?" Leah sighed deeply, her fingers nervously twirling a strand of hair. "Nathan, I have to. This isn't about choosing them over you. It's about me, about what I need right now." Nathan clenched his fists, his frustration palpable. "And what about us? When you come back, do you think everything will just be the same? Can we just pick up where we left off?" Tears welled up in Leah's eyes as she shook her head, her voice unsteady. "I don't know. I wish I could promise that everything will be okay, but I can't. All I know is that I need to do this." Nathan stepped closer, his voice breaking with each word. "Leah, I love you. I don't want to lose you." Leah wiped her tears, her voice trembling as much as her resolve. "I love you too, but I need to do this." Closing his eyes, Nathan felt the finality of the moment. He realized then that no words could alter her course. They were at a crossroads and each had to choose their path no matter how much it hurt. He had lost her, at least for now. "Goodbye, Leah," Nathan whispered, his voice barely audible as his heart splintered. Turning, he walked out the door, each step heavier than the last. Leah remained in the doorway, tears cascading down her cheeks as she watched him leave. She was convinced that pursuing her dreams was the right choice, yet the pain of the moment was overwhelming. As Nathan drove away from Leah's apartment, the weight of their final words hung in the air, suffocating him. He had hoped that this last meeting might bring some clarity or closure, but instead it had etched a deep sense of finality into his heart. The stark reality that Leah had chosen her adventure over their shared life together cut through him sharply. In the following days, Nathan tried to immerse himself in his work, to lose himself in the physical exhaustion of the gym, but Leah's absence haunted every quiet moment. The songs on the radio seemed to mock him with memories of her, and the cold emptiness on her side of the bed was a constant reminder of her absence. The silence in his apartment was no longer peaceful, it was oppressive. Nathan's friends, seeing his distress, attempted to pull him from his reverie by dragging him out for drinks and engaging him in the usual weekend escapades. He played along, laughing at the right moments and smiling through the stories, but it was all a hollow act. Inside, he was unraveling. A few weeks after Leah's departure, Nathan found himself at a bar with Chris, a close college friend who had become his confidant during the tumultuous times with Leah. Chris was straightforward, never one to mince words, and that night was no different. So Chris began, pausing to take a sip of his beer. "You've been moping around for weeks now. It's time to snap out of it, man. You're acting like it's the end of the world." Nathan stirred the ice in his glass, the clink echoing his fragmented thought. "It kind of feels like it, doesn't it?" he replied. "Leah and I were supposed to be building a future together. Now she's traversing the country, living her dream, and I'm just stuck here." Chris set his beer down with a firm thud, his gaze intent on Nathan. "Look, I'm going to be straight with you. She's made her choice, and it's time for you to make yours." His words, though harsh, were not without compassion. Chris knew the gravity of the situation, and he understood that Nathan needed a push to start moving forward, however painful the first steps might be. "You can't just sit around waiting for her to come back, hoping things will magically fix themselves," Chris urged, his tone firm yet concerned. "You need to decide what you want for yourself." Nathan stared into his drink, Chris's words weighing heavily on him. He knew his friend was right, but accepting it was another matter. "What if she comes back and everything's the same? What if we can work things out?" He mused aloud, clinging to a sliver of hope. Chris scoffed lightly, leaning back in his chair with a shake of his head. Man, you've got to let go of that false hope. She chose to leave, Nate. She prioritized her desires and her friends over what you two had. Even if she comes back, can you honestly say you'll trust her the same way? Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and buddy, that foundation has cracks now. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of his inner turmoil. I know, I don't know what to do. I thought we had a future together. Chris patted him on the back, his smile sympathetic but encouraged. We all think that at some point, but sometimes things just don't pan out the way we plan. You gotta pick yourself up, man. Move on. And who knows, maybe there's someone out there who's actually ready to build that future with you. Despite Chris's encouragement, Nathan felt a void where his heart used to be, a sense of loss so profound that it seemed nothing could fill it. As the evening progressed and the bar filled with the laughter and chatter of others, Nathan felt increasingly detached, like an observer in his own life, watching as the world moved on without him. Meanwhile, Leah's summer adventure unfolded just as she had dreamed. She, Sarah, and Emma packed up Leah's car and embarked on their cross-country journey, exploring quaint towns, national parks, and cities they had long wished to visit. The freedom they experienced was intoxicating, each day brimming with new adventures and discoveries. For the initial weeks, Leah made efforts to keep Nathan in the loop. She sent him photos of breathtaking views, updates on their escapades, and occasionally called him during quieter moments. However, his responses were brief and increasingly distant, and over time, Leah's attempts to connect dwindled. As the weeks turned into months, Leah's thoughts of Nathan grew less frequent. The exhilaration of her travels, coupled with the constant presence of her friends, filled her days and nights, pushing thoughts of what she had left behind to the distant corners of her mind. The journey wasn't just a physical escape, but an emotional one too, as she slowly began to untangle her life from Nathan. Leah, under the vast Utah sky speckled with stars, felt a surge of mixed emotions. While one part of her reveled in the independence she had longed for, another part wrestled with guilt over how quickly she seemed to have moved on from Nathan. As Emma and Sarah slept soundly nearby, Leah lay awake in her sleeping bag, the quiet of the night amplifying her internal conflict. She had always envisioned this freedom, the thrill of exploring new places without constraint, yet now faced with the reality, she found it bittersweet. Absently, she reached for her phone, her thumb lingering over Nathan's contact. She hesitated, her heart heavy. What could she possibly say? That she missed him? That she regretted her choices? Confusion clouded her thoughts, and instead of sending a message, she turned off her phone, rolling to her side as she tried to find comfort in the solitude of her sleeping bag. The crickets chirped in the background, their melody a stark contrast to the tumult within her. Meanwhile, back home, Nathan was taking tentative steps toward a new chapter in his life. The conversation with Chris had been a turning point, prompting him to reevaluate his priorities and focus on personal growth. He began to spend more time with friends, immerse himself in his career, and explore new hobbies that filled the emptiness left by Leah's departure. One evening, as he was about to leave the office, his coworker Lauren caught him by the elevator with an inviting smile. "Hey Nathan," she began, "a few of us are heading to that new place down the street for dinner. Want to come along?" Initially hesitant, Nathan realized that withdrawing from social interactions wasn't helping him heal. With a slight nod and a small smile, he accepted. "Sure, sounds like fun." The dinner turned out to be a pleasant escape. They chose a quaint restaurant with outdoor seating where the warm evening air and lively conversation helped lift Nathan's spirits. He found himself genuinely enjoying the moment, laughing and participating in the discussions more freely than he had in weeks. Lauren, noticing the change in his demeanor, commented from across the table, "You seem a lot more relaxed tonight," her grin encouraging. Nathan chuckled in response, his mood light. "Yeah, I guess I've been a little out of it late." Lauren's eyebrow arched playfully. "A little? Try a lot." The banter was friendly, and for the first time in a long time, Nathan felt a sense of belonging and normalcy that he hadn't realized he'd been missing. This evening marked a small yet significant milestone in his journey of moving forward, surrounded by colleagues who were quickly becoming friends. But another part of him, the part that still cared deeply for Leah, wanted to hear what she had to say. He stood there in the gym, holding his phone tightly, the weight of the decision pressing on him. Eventually, he typed a response, his fingers moving slowly as he considered each word. "Okay, Leah, let's talk when you get back." As Nathan hit send, he felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. The past few weeks had been a journey of self-discovery and healing, but Leah's impending return stirred up old feelings that he thought he had started to overcome. He finished his workout with a newfound restlessness, his thoughts tangled with possibilities of what Leah might say and the implications for their future. Back on the road, Leah felt a nervous energy pulse through her as she sent the message to Nathan. She had spent the trip trying to find herself, but in doing so, she realized how much Nathan still meant to her. The adventure had been breathtaking, yet the joy was tinged with an undercurrent of loneliness without him to share it. As she watched the changing landscapes from the back seat, Leah pondered the difficult conversations that awaited her. The trip had changed her. She had grown in ways she hadn't anticipated, and she wondered if Nathan could see and accept these changes. The thought of reconnecting was both exhilarating and terrifying. In the days leading up to her return, Leah's mind was a whirlwind of doubts and decisions. She rehearsed conversations in her head, each scenario playing out differently. She worried about the changes in Nathan too. Had he moved on? Was there still a place for her in his life? The uncertainty was agonizing. Meanwhile, Nathan tried to keep his mind occupied with work and social outings, but Leah's message lingered in the back of his mind. He talked it over with Lauren one evening after work, seeking advice from someone who had seen him through his darkest days post-breakup. Lauren listened intently, then offered her perspective. "It's good to talk, Nathan. No matter what happens, you'll get some closure. It's clear part of you still cares, and you owe it to yourself to find out where you both stand." Nathan appreciated Lauren's insight. She had a way of simplifying complex emotions, making them seem more manageable. As the day of Leah's return approached, Nathan prepared himself mentally and emotionally. He knew this conversation could potentially reopen old wounds, but he also knew that avoiding it would only lead to more uncertainty. The anticipation of Leah's return filled both of their hearts with a mix of hope and fear, each pondering the potential reunion with intense emotion. "Every day I thought about you. I had to do this for me, to find out what I wanted out of life, away from everything else," Leah explained, her eyes seeking understanding in Nathan's. Nathan took a moment to absorb her words, his features softening slightly as he processed her explanation. "I get that you needed to find yourself, Leah. I really do. But you have to understand how it felt from my end. It felt like you chose a dream over us, over everything we had built together." Leah nodded, the pain evident in her eye. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. Coming back here, seeing everything and everyone moving on, it's made me realize how much I've missed, not just you, but the life we had. I don't expect things to go back to how they were, but I hope we can at least find some way to move forward." The cafe around them buzzed with activity, but in their little corner, a bubble of solemnity had formed. Nathan considered her words, the history they shared making him want to reach across the table and bridge the gap, yet his reservations held him back. "It's not just about moving on, Leah. It's about whether we can trust each other again. Can we build something new after everything?" Nathan's voice was steady, but Leah could hear the underlying vulnerability. Leah reached across the table, her hand hesitating in the air before she set it down near his. "I want to try, Nathan. If you're willing, I want to rebuild that trust. No expectations, just a chance to see if there's something we can salvage from this." Nathan looked at her hand, then up at her face, searching for the sincerity in her plea. After a moment, he placed his hand over hers, the contact tentative but charged with a flurry of suppressed emotion. "Okay, we'll take it slow, see where things go. No promises, but we can try." A small smile formed on Leah's lips, a mixture of relief and renewed anxiety about the future. "Thank you, Nathan. That means more to me than you know." As they continued to talk, the initial awkwardness began to dissipate, replaced by a cautious optimism. They shared updates about their lives, the conversation gradually becoming more fluid, more natural. It was clear there were still challenges ahead, but the first steps toward understanding and possibly reconciliation had been taken. Their meeting ended with an agreement to keep in touch, to meet again, to slowly explore the dynamics of their new reality. As Leah left the cafe, a sense of hope fluttered in her chest, tempered by the knowledge of the long journey ahead. Nathan watched her go, feeling a complex blend of past pain and potential for the future. This was not a reunion, but perhaps it was a new beginning. And now Leah realized she had to face the consequences of those decisions alone. Her journey for independence had led her here, to this moment of painful clarity. As the cafe gradually emptied and the evening light faded, Leah collected her thoughts and her belongings, preparing to leave. The conversation with Nathan, though heart-wrenching, had offered her a necessary closure. It hadn't gone the way she had hoped, yet it was the truth she needed to hear. Outside, the city streets were bustling with the typical evening crowd, but Leah felt isolated in her bubble of introspection. Each step she took was heavy, each breath a bit sharper as she processed the finality of Nathan's words. Love wasn't enough, not when trust was shattered, not when paths diverged so fundamentally. As she walked, Leah's mind wandered back to the highs of her travels, the freedom, the beauty, the sheer thrill of new experiences. These memories, once bright and exhilarating, now cast a shadow of solitude. She realized that her quest for self-discovery had cost her more than she had ever anticipated. Back at his apartment, Nathan was also grappling with the aftermath of their meeting. The emptiness of the place echoed his inner void, a stark reminder of what he had lost. He had wanted to believe that there was a way forward for them, but the conversation had dashed those hopes. His feelings for Leah, though dulled by pain and betrayal, still lingered, making the separation all the more bitter. Nathan knew he needed to move on, to rebuild his life without Leah. The path wouldn't be easy. The wounds were deep, and healing would take time. Perhaps he would eventually find someone new, someone with whom trust could be foundational, not a casualty. For now, he focused on the little things that kept his days structured and his mind away from the hurt. Meanwhile, Leah, walking through the city, felt a resolve begin to form. She had ventured out to find herself, and in a convoluted, painful way, she had. The cost was high, perhaps too high, but the lessons were invaluable. She knew that moving forward meant embracing her newfound strength and independence, using them not just to explore the world, but to navigate the complexities of her emotions and relationships. The journey wasn't over for either of them. It had merely shifted, transformed by their experiences and the choices they had made. As the night settled in, both Leah and Nathan faced their separate futures, their stories forever marked by a love that had taught them the hardest lessons of all. And now Leah realized she had to face the consequences of those decisions alone. Her journey for independence had led her here, to this moment of painful clarity. As the cafe gradually emptied and the evening light faded, Leah collected her thoughts and her belongings, preparing to leave. The conversation with Nathan, though heart-wrenching, had offered her a necessary closure. It hadn't gone the way she had hoped, yet it was the truth she needed to hear. Outside, the city streets were bustling with the typical evening crowd, but Leah felt isolated in her bubble of introspection. Each step she took was heavy, each breath a bit sharper as she processed the finality of Nathan's words. Love wasn't enough, not when trust was shattered, not when paths diverged so fundamentally. As she walked, Leah's mind wandered back to the highs of her travels, the freedom, the beauty, the sheer thrill of new experiences. These memories, once bright and exhilarating, now cast a shadow of solitude. She realized that her quest for self-discovery had cost her more than she had ever anticipated. Back at his apartment, Nathan was also grappling with the aftermath of their meeting. The emptiness of the place echoed his inner void, a stark reminder of what he had lost. He had wanted to believe that there was a way forward for them, but the conversation had dashed those hopes. His feelings for Leah, though dulled by pain and betrayal, still lingered, making the separation all the more bitter. Nathan knew he needed to move on, to rebuild his life without Leah. The path wouldn't be easy. The wounds were deep, and healing would take time. Perhaps he would eventually find someone new, someone with whom trust could be foundational, not a casualty. For now, he focused on the little things that kept his days structured and his mind away from the hurt. Meanwhile, Leah, walking through the city, felt a resolve begin to form. She had ventured out to find herself, and in a convoluted, painful way she had. The cost was high, perhaps too high, but the lessons were invaluable. She knew that moving forward meant embracing her newfound strength and independence, using them not just to explore the world, but to navigate the complexities of her emotions and relationships. The journey wasn't over for either of them. It had merely shifted, transformed by their experiences and the choices they had made. As the night settled in, both Leah and Nathan faced their separate futures, their stories forever marked by a love that had taught them the hardest lessons of all.